All right, welcome back to Soccer Matters on ESPN 97.5, as always presented by John Daspit and the Daspit Law Firm. Hey, look, you get in a car, boat, motorcycle accident, you need the best when it comes to a personal injury attorney. It's John Daspit. It's the Daspit Law Firm, 713, call now or contact them at daspitlaw.com. And we thank them for bringing soccer to the airwaves and on the radio for so many years. And speaking of a guy who's seen the game through a very different lens, our next guest, he's an award-winning writer. His name is Charles Cuttone. He is, for me, one of the gatekeepers of the game in the United States. He has just completed a book called, Pele, His North American Years, a Tribute. And Charles joins us now. Charles, thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you, Glenn. Thanks for having me.
All right. I love the title already. I'm going to hit you with the title. Pele, His North American Years. And I get the sense this book covers it better than anybody's ever done it. But then there is a tribute. Tell me why you put a tribute.
Well, because we kind of looked at this. I really wanted to look at this from the lens of when I first met Pele, which I was a 13-year-old kid working in the Cosmos front office. And honestly, then I didn't really know much about soccer. When he came here, it was such a special time. It was a special time for the sport. It was a special time for me in my life, kind of growing up, really through my high school years, working for the team, being around Pele, being around all the great stars that we had. And when George Tiedemann came to me with the idea for the book, we were trying to find a more traditional publisher without having much luck. I decided, my company would go ahead and do it. And it was just right after Pele had passed away. So we just felt that was something that was necessary. And I think, with all the success that MLS has had, I think a lot of people kind of forget where those seeds were planted. It wasn't in 96 with the league starting. It wasn't in 94 with the World Cup being here. It was in 1975 when he first stepped out of a helicopter onto Randall's Island to look at what he was getting himself into.
He's Charles Cuttone, writer of the new book. It's called Pele, His North American Years, a Tribute. And look at a lot of the excerpts, and I'm going to need my copy, Charles, for my coffee table.
Absolutely.
But looking at the excerpts, you do this in a much more detailed way through your lens than others, I think.
Well, I think part of it comes from the perspective of being there. Just looked specifically at those 3 years, that time here in North America, the growth of the sport that happened in those 3 years. It's never been looked at from that perspective, and that's what I tried to do in the words and wrapping those around George's tremendous pictures, because it's really the pictures that kind of tell the whole story.
Yeah, it's George Tiedemann, the photographer. I often think of Pele, and I've said this on the radio show before, this was at a time when there wasn't player movement. People weren't trying to get to Europe and play in different places. So if you were lucky enough to be like us in the New York metropolitan area, we probably got to see Pele play the game live outside of Santos in Brazil or at World Cups more than anybody.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, his team Santos was very busy making tours because they were cashing in on his fame and his skill. So he did play some in the U.S. before, and I think that kind of planted the seeds for why people wanted to see him once he came to play here. And you're right about the movement to Europe. It was very, very rare at the time that players from South America or anywhere went to play, or even that players in Europe moved from one country to another. If you look at most of the rosters of top flight teams from that era, all the English teams were probably 99% UK players. All the Italian teams were all Italian. So you really didn't have a global sport.
Charles, talk to us about the acceleration. I mean, Pelé comes here. He plays in three different stadiums: Downing Stadium on Randall's Island, Yankee Stadium, and then this short amount of time, all of a sudden you're getting these massive crowds at Giant Stadium. These were games me and my buddies went to as kids, and now we had a standard of hey, maybe one day we can be one of the American players in this league. But just speak to that acceleration about once he came here and just how this team went from playing on a dirt field and a field strewn with grass with the world's greatest player to all of a sudden being in Giant Stadium to packed houses and crowds that included Mick Jagger and Robert Plant.
Well, I think when Clive Toy was pursuing Pele, he had an idea in mind that Giant Stadium was going to open in 1977. And when Pele first agreed to play for the Cosmos, he told Clive initially 2 years. And Clive said, no, it's got to be 3 because the new stadium is going to open, and that's where you have to be. And we, in 1975, we couldn't even really look that far ahead. We had a very small office staff, maybe 5 or 6 people. They hired a marketing director right around the time that Pele was signed, and he didn't even have an office. He sat at the coffee table and the couch in the reception area. That's how, just where we went. We went from that to, at the end of that season, moving into half a floor in the Warner Communications building in Rockefeller Center. I mean, that was really going uptown at that, better than playing in Randall's Island, where we actually did paint the dirt green for Pele's first game.
I remember that game distinctively, and there was an overpass, right? And people were stopping on the overpass in their cars and standing along the railing.
Yeah, the stadium was under the Triborough Bridge, so yeah, that generated some crowds up there for not only that game but the rest of the season.
He's Charles Cuttone. The book is Pelé, His North American Years. Charles, quickly, where can people get the book?
Pretty much anywhere you can buy books. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, local bookstores. If they don't have it in stock, it's in their systems so they can get it. That's where we're encouraging people to go, your local bookstore, support local businesses, especially now with the holidays coming up. But pretty much anywhere you can buy a book.
All right, I got a Barnes and Nobles right around the corner. I'm going to go there and get my copy there.
Great.
Charles Cuttone, it's Pelé, His North American Years, a tribute. I'm sure when I read this fully, this is going to bring back a tremendous amount of memories of me and my buddies driving in the car from the suburbs to Giant Stadium to see Pelé. I saw him at Randall's Island, and I also saw him at Yankee Stadium. But, I think people reflecting on the past don't realize that the game was not in the suburbs then. I was only fortunate that I had a coach come from Kearny, New Jersey, and train us every day of the week. But the game was not in the suburbs. It was in ethnic areas around cities at those times.
It was, and to a large degree that made it almost invisible. I mean, the media didn't really cover the sport. The NASL was starting to grow a little bit on the West Coast. The markets like San Jose and Seattle had come in and were having some success there, which was really at that point where the core of a lot of the youth soccer was going on out on the West Coast. And I think a telling statistic that I found actually after I finished the book, but when Pele got here, there were only about 100,000 registered players with U.S. soccer. By 1980, less than 5 years later, it was over 1 million. That just, he sparked that growth. Like you said, kids like you, kids like Brandy Chastain, Tony Miola, John Harkes, Tab Ramos, young kids seeing this and seeing that, hey, there's a possibility in this game.
Yeah, that's hard. That's hard data too. That is pretty incredible. He's Charles Cuttone again. It's Pelé, His North American Years, a tribute. You were around the man. I was at a press conference here in Houston once when we played him. We played against San Jose, and I think it was a UNICEF match. There was all these events going on, and Pelé was brought in, and we were in a press conference, and we got a little bit close to him. The magnetism, the smile, you having been close to him. Tell me about this, the things that you liked about him, the qualities, what aura he carried.
He was a superstar who didn't act like it. Um, he treated people like they were important, like they meant something to him because they did. He truly liked people. He liked being around people. I mean, there were so many times, after games, especially on the road, it was tougher at Giant Stadium because we had that 10-foot wall around the field. But in places like Rochester, where there was a 3-foot high fence, and the fans could just crowd along there, security had to hustle him away from, to get him to stop signing autographs so we could get on the bus to get back to the hotel or get to the airport. Or he would have stayed there all night until every fan in that stadium had an autograph or had a chance to take a picture or shake hands with him. And that's just so very rare among, athletes anywhere. I've been around all kinds of sports my whole life, and you don't see somebody with that kind of charisma, that magnetism, but yet that humbleness that, he remembers where he came from. He was born very poor in Brazil. And while he, rubbed elbows with kings and presidents and popes, he still very much had time for people.
Charles,
And
did
he
you have
enjoyed spending
the
time.
sense that he knew he was there breaking virgin territory when it came to the sport? Did he really realize that this was an opportunity to grow a game in a place where it wasn't popular?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That was part of the mission. It wasn't to come here and win a championship really, although that was important. I think that was important to all the other players on the team in 1977 that they send Pele out with a championship, but he'd won everything. He'd won 3 World Cups. He'd won club championships. They beat Benfica in the World Cup Club Championship in '63, and I think Real Madrid in another one. But it wasn't about that, and he knew that. I mean, he did the press conferences, he did the interviews, he did all of the things that he needed to do. I mean, every road game, there was a press conference 2 days or a day before the game in whatever city we went to, and that was just Pele. It wasn't a team thing. It wasn't, it wasn't like they do now, a 20-minute media op. It was a press conference. And if there were 50 people there and 50 people wanted to ask a question, he answered 50 questions.
Charles Cuttone, it's Pele, his North American soccer years, his North American years, a tribute. By the way, this would be a great Christmas present. I'm gonna get myself a Christmas present today, Charles. I'm gonna go get the book on my own. Uh,
Great. Thanks.
it, Charles has been a fantastic writer for the game. Obviously, you're hearing also through the lens of him as being in the PR department of the New York Cosmos. He's been involved in the game for over 50 years. And as he mentioned, George Tiedemann did a lot of the photos in this book. So you're going to see stuff that's just iconic and historic. Okay, so huge crowds accelerating the game by 77, but the NASL ultimately doesn't make it. It didn't have the support of the grassroots game yet. It wasn't there like it is now in Major League Soccer. What's the takeaway from it? And would we even be here without it?
I don't think we would be. I don't think we would be. There's an old Italian adage, loosely translated, he who plants the olive tree never eats its fruit. And I think that's a good analogy to here. Um, those seeds were planted in 1975 in that painted dirt. And it is taken until now. There were some people that were in the NASL that were involved in starting MLS, like Lamar Hunt, and a lot of people along the way who played a huge role in getting it to where it is. Um, but I think you can, even though the history of soccer is really a chopped up line, unlike other sports where you can look at football and go back to the very first game, and you know, the big events, and it's been fairly consistent. The history of soccer has been chopped up, but if you really look at where it started and what the timeline was, the idea for hosting a World Cup was planted in the NASL. We bid for the World Cup in '86 when they had to move it out of Colombia and didn't get it. Um, and that was really the first seeds to, you know, where we are now. Because in '88, when we bid, we did get it. And the reason that we got it was because FIFA looked and said, well, this is a country that has drawn 70,000 people for a soccer game. They know how to put people in the stadiums for soccer. And that all happened on the back of what Pele and the Cosmos and the NASL did.
Pelé and the Cosmos hooked a lot of non-soccer people too. I think we sometimes forget that. Yes, a lot of the game is learned and has been learned generationally through kids playing, and parents that didn't play have come to love the game. But Pelé also introduced the game to a lot of people that really had no interest in it.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, I'm thinking back to the Cosmos time, and you know, kids that I went to school with were looking for tickets, and by '77, I mean, in '75, before Pele got here, I couldn't give them away. Um, and you know, in '77, people, you know, people I hadn't seen in a couple of years or whatever were calling me and, can you get me tickets for the playoff game? I'd like to go to the farewell game. And these were not people that had an interest in soccer. And I think again, that idea that, you know, there was a superstar and his magnetism and his skill. It certainly wasn't where it was in the 1970 World Cup, but I would still say that when he got here by 1976, 75 was a bit of a rough season. He had an injury, very similar to Messi coming, and he only played a handful of league games, and he had an injury. But by '76, he was really starting to show the skill again that was there and clicking better with the team. And I would say at that time, he was still one of the best players in the world. Absolutely. Even at, I think, 36 or 37.
He's Charles Cuttone. Pelé is his book, His North American Years, a tribute. Part of me tells me you wrote this book because you still want people to realize something came before them. You know, because of the digital world and technology, everything's about quick hits now. But people forget how we got to this point, how we have been provided opportunity, how the sport has been provided opportunity. So part of me tells me there's a piece of you that wants to kind of subtly remind people about how we got to this point.
Absolutely. And you know, I love the history of the game, and it goes back even before Pele coming here. And some of the work that I'm doing now with US soccer on Open Cup history and going back into the 20s, 30s, and 40s with some of the stories I'm doing for them. But writing the stories and some of the things and the way I wrote them were to remind people of that we didn't start in 1996. We didn't start in 1994 with the World Cup. And certainly we didn't start in 1975, but really I think that was what you could call, and one of the chapters in the book is soccer's Big Bang. And that's what it was. And I think if you look at almost every sport that has attained a certain level, it's had that kind of big bang. I mean, in the NFL, I always talk about that great championship game in 1958. You know, the NBA, it was the Bird Magic years. So every sport that has gotten to a certain level has had that big bang. And Pele coming here and generating those crowds and winning the championship, and that was something the script writers at Warner couldn't have done a better job at doing. That ending, especially since the team was struggling mid-season.
Charles Cuttone joining us. So Charles, you know, you had Pelé, you had the watershed moment of David Beckham. Now we have Lionel Messi. These are probably the three-pronged attack historically of megastars that have come to America. As far as drawing direct parallels to any of this. I guess I'll go to Messi because there was a pursuit of him from Inter Miami, obviously, for a couple of years.
Right.
Thing with Clive Toy going after Pelé. What sort of parallels do you draw?
Well, obviously the biggest parallel is, I mean, in my mind, Pele will always be number one, but that's the biggest thing. But if you look at where the game is now, okay, Messi comes to MLS and the Chicago Fire draw 60,000 when he's expected to play there. Or Charlotte draws 66,000 for the last game of the season. That wasn't the first time MLS had drawn crowds of 60,000. That wasn't the first time Charlotte filled their stadium. There's going to be a bump to the league, but I don't think it's comparable. That there's that next level that we're going to. It's not going to be. I think the big thing for the league is maybe the television viewers. I saw something the other day where they said that the viewership for Apple games that Messi was playing in was about 1 million. So that's certainly a great number, and if his being here helps generate the TV numbers that the league needs, then that's great. But I don't think anybody's surprised that 60,000 people were in Soldier Field. How many games have we seen at Soldier Field with 60,000 people there? That wasn't the case in 1976 and 77 when this started happening, because it wasn't just Giant Stadium where the team was filling games. I mean, the first game that was played in the Kingdom, 58,000 people, 40 something in Tampa, over 30 in RFK Stadium. The league was setting new attendance record, but we will see, I think, a growth in interest in the game overall. I mean, the jerseys are flying off the shelf. People are watching on TV. They're selling tickets. Teams are now baking that game into ticket packages for next year. So, if you want that game, you've got to either buy a season ticket or other tickets. So it's going to be good for MLS and the sport, but I don't think it's a seminal change in the sport. It moves us up another level, but how big a jump that is, I don't think it's the same.
Charles, congratulations on the book. It's called Pelé: His North American Years, a tribute. Thank you very much for coming on the show tonight. I know my
Thank you, Glenn.
Will love this. A happy Thanksgiving to you and yours.
Thank you. Same to you.
And we look forward to talking to you again.
Enjoy doing it.
All right, that's Charles Cuttone. It's Pelé: His North American Years, a tribute. It's a great book. Get it. That'll wrap it up tonight here for Soccer Matters on ESPN 97.5, presented by Daspit Law Firm. It's daspitlaw.com, 713-CALL now. By the way, subscribe to the show. It helps us on the podcast after the fact of live radio at Spotify, Apple, Google, wherever. You can also get things at ESPN975.com. Of course, a big thank you, as always, to Lamont Brands. That's where you get the Soccer Matters T-shirts and hats. All the proceeds to the 501c charity, the Snowdrop Foundation. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.